All right, folks, we are getting started. Just a couple minutes late, 4 minutes late. Just have to get into the Zoom here. Thank you. Welcome to the Connecticut Public Transportation Council. We always like to do this and always pleased to have you all with us. I know we try to accommodate and make sure that we have it on a night when you are all gathering, and I'm sure you're gathering right down the street tonight. So we'll make sure we get you out on time, but love having you here and looking forward to an update. Um, as you know, we're all racing around the building and have a million meetings going on. We've got some folks with us on Zoom, and we've got some folks that will be in and out of the room, and some folks that are just going to have to watch it back. But with that, I'm going to turn it over. Do the ranking members have any opening remarks?
Just a quick hello. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I have to go up to appropriations at 5. So I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. Thank you, guys.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to get you guys out, but why don't you just dive right in? We'd love to hear from you, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions from the committee members.
Well, again, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This has become, oh, you want Michael to sit closer to me? Okay. All right. So my name is Jim Gilday. I'm chair of the Connecticut Public Transportation Council. We are grateful to be here. I'm just going to touch upon 4 key points, and then I'll turn it over to my peer, Kate Rosen, and who will speak, our vice chair. And then I don't know if Doug and Mike want to say a few words. I just want to say that I appreciate the opportunity as we segued into the Connecticut Public Transportation Council from the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council. It's really been eye-opening on really so many levels. Being focused on transit a little more than just rail has been eye-opening. So one of the few things I just want to mention that I did want to advocate for is there's 2 bills, 5460 and 722, which concern public transportation and fares with regards to high school seniors and veterans. I also, did read the governor's budget where they did talk about an increase in bus fares. It's just my belief that in a time when we came off of a budget that had record-setting tax decreases, and we're talking about a budget this year that also is talking about budget decreases, I think we could do better in the area of public transportation, especially for transit, and especially for those people who are amongst those who need transportation the most. So I think raising fares for them is certainly a slippery slope. As a manufacturer and president of Manufacture Connecticut, another hat I wear and manufacture Bigelow Tea, I will tell you that by far one of the biggest impediments to workforce development is transportation, and making it just a little bit harder by fare increases certainly will be problematic for that. And again, big fan of making it easier in some of the fare-free bills. I would also be remiss if I didn't talk about the Shoreline East funding and segue over to rail. I do want to mention that we've lost a key member of our commission since we last met on April 15th. Zell C. Stever from Noank passed away. Unfortunately, Zell did not see the effects of the 4 trains on the Shoreline East. But so let me share those, what the effects of those 4 trains were, and the additional $5 million that you were able to secure and that you were able to pump into that line. In September, that line saw a 32% increase over its ridership from last year. In October, it saw a 58% increase over its ridership from the previous year. In November, 74% increase in ridership from last November. And in December, 53%. Those numbers are staggering. It's a testament to the fact that that is a vibrant line, and it could be a vibrant line. I will continue to say that the only reason that ridership struggles is because it's the only branch, the only line that didn't get its pre-COVID service level back. We could talk about development, we could talk about smoke and mirrors, but at the end of the day, it's because that line was never given a chance. And when given a chance with just 4 trains, we're talking about a 74% increase in ridership in November. That's staggering. So I would really ask that we fight for additional funding on the Shoreline East. And when budget time comes and they're looking to cut taxes, please remember 74%, because that line has some tremendous potential. Last 2 things I'll just mention before I turn it over. There's House Bill 5461, an act concerning reserve seating on public transportation for people with disabilities. I will tell you, and I don't know if Phil Magnalick is on the line, but this has been a truly educational journey for me. As someone who does not suffer from a disability, I think sometimes I was unaware of the plight of those who do. Um, whether it be in seating, whether it be in ticketing, whether it be in station announcements. Hi, Al Sylvester, council member. I will tell you that those folks who are struggle with disability or disabled, they're often an afterthought. I was actually shocked to hear that there's really, so if you go to your local Target or Walmart, there's designated seating, there's designating parking spots for handicapped drivers. Can't park there. No such thing exists for people on trains or buses, and there's no enforcement. So if someone chooses to sit in a handicap spot, it's just the luck of the draw. So I will just say that it's been a journey for me, recognizing that often at times people with disabilities are an afterthought when it comes to public transit. And then my very last thing I'll say, other than I'm very grateful for the time here today, is that we continue to struggle from an administrative perspective. I paid for the website for the first number of years. Fortunately, Kate lives in Woodbridge. She has more money than me, so she's picked up the tab. Just private joke. But anyway, so we continue to pay, for all administrative fees, website hosting, postage, whatever advertising we do. At times, we struggle. We have a website, but it's a third-party website. Our minutes get posted, our agenda gets posted, but it's all by a group of volunteers. I will tell you that we continue to struggle from an administrative perspective. So that's my 2 cents. I appreciate the opportunity to give it. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Kate Rosen. I live in Woodbridge. Everyone knows that. And the website cost is not insignificant. But the bigger issue is, and our member Philip brought this to our attention, is that we need to be in compliance with ADA regulations and being able to use a screen reader. Most of the other councils that are appointed by executive branch and legislative branches have websites that are hosted by the state. I will use the Connecticut Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Council or Commission as an example. Their minutes and their agendas are posted. It's hosted on a website. This impacts our ability to be reachable by the public. So it relies on us kind of leveraging our social media and our MailChimp lists to be able to reach people. But if someone is trying to figure out who they should talk to about concerns about bus and rail, and who can advocate on their behalf, I don't see any reason why we don't have a landing spot, just like most of the other councils do. In terms of, Jim mentioned the fare increases. In 2018, Connecticut DOT also pursued a 14% fare increase. There is an equity analysis that needs to be completed when you ask for a fare increase, and you have to prove that it's not going to be disproportionately impactful on low-income residents in the state of Connecticut. And I have a hard time believing with our current economic kind of climate that you would be able to kind of meet that threshold. I also believe that the 10% split over 2 years is a way to kind of get around that same kind of equity consideration. I think we have a lot more people who are using the train intracity in the state of Connecticut and not necessarily using it as a tool to go from Connecticut to New York. And we can't have a robust state if we don't have robust transit. Let's see. This guy was so good. He covered pretty much everything that I would have said as well. I will mention HB 5061, studying a commuter rail connection to Bradley Airport. I think that if you're going to do it, this is the moment before we get further into the Hartford study where we're moving highways and moving the train station. I have a great transit advocate named Casey Moran. He'd come and present it at our council meeting. And there's a lot of, I think, compelling reasons why it would be great to have an at-grade entrance to the train. So that way you get off the train and then you can, go down the Hartford line. Tweed is great with climate. We don't know whether or not that runway is not going to have water on it, but Bradley, I think, is a better solution. So I would hope that we would use that study meaningfully. And the only other thing that you'll all love to hear this, before I was going to bed last night, I was thinking about seeing all of you. And so what I want to say is we are all, we have all have this like special intimate connection with transportation, and we're very privileged in that if we want to go, we can, for the most part, grab our car keys and go. Um, and when we're doing this work, we're really thinking about and working with the people who don't have that privilege and who have to rely on our transportation systems and networks. We need to be investing more in it so that way we can have the robust economy, that someone can use our transit systems to go see their family, to take an aging parent to a doctor appointment, to take their kid to school. I think that we've kind of shoved it into a tiny box that other people use. And I would hope that, as we all move forward, we invest more in it. And my final point will be, the bill that's up about free public transit for youth. The state of Washington does this. They have a universal fare program called the Orca card. It's single tap, and they have figured out a way to support young people being able to use transit. I remember so distinctly during the conversations around why we couldn't have fare free, was people from Condot and others saying, well, if we don't charge anyone, that means someone who has the means to be able to pay for a ticket isn't paying for it. And then, we need that extra revenue. Well, we've got that extra revenue back. I think we need to be doing far more to support our low income riders in as non-burdensome way as possible. I think the hurdles to be able to get, low income assistance for transit are too high. And I think that those of you who got to see the high school students who came and testified, how could you not want to support them being able to get to their activities after school? And those are just the ones who were able to come from Hartford. We're not hearing from the kiddos from New Haven. And there were other cities who wanted to be able to participate in that. So thank you again for your time. It's so great to see all of you, and we are very grateful to be able to work with you. And yeah, thanks.
I will say, it looks like a member of your council has his hand raised online. So Philip McGalnick, do you want to say a few words?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. This is Philip McGalnick from Stanford. I am blind, as is my wife. So I come to this with the perspective of people with disabilities and accessibility, as well, obviously, as ADA compliance. I'd like to expand upon the comments of both Jim and Kate with respect to those two issues. The first one being the people with disabilities in Connecticut. The makeup is approximately 20% of the population, and that's a combination of data from the Census and National Institutes for Health. So not an insignificant number of people with disabilities among us. And I guess it's quite possible to believe and to comprehend that the majority of us do not drive, rely on public transportation, whether it's medical, leisure activities, work, all aspects of life. We live on the trains, the buses, and ride sharing. So the concerns I've always brought to the table with respect to accessibility on the trains and buses are making sure that our announcements are understandable, are clear, precise, that the signage is accessible. I cannot see a printed sign. So when data changes on a signboard or a schedule board, I have no way of knowing. There must be an audible component to that, as well as, for instance, the New Haven train station going through the corridor. No, I did have sight, probably decades ago. I remember the big numbers on the wall where the tracks are, track 4, track 2, etc. Being blind, there's no signage right now, either in Braille or raised print, that I can figure out where I am without the assistance of someone else or using an app on my phone, which is often not the best signal in the bottom of the train station. So being able to independently travel has been hampered. Now, do use a guide dog, but my dog doesn't, not yet anyway, hasn't learned how to read the signs or posts or see time changes. The DOT is talking about putting new signage at bus stops, bus stations, train stations, on trains, and on buses. Under Title II of the ADA, the state is mandated to make sure that the signage is accessible to all persons under the Effective Communications Clause. So whatever is available to those who can see should be available to those who cannot see. And if something's audible, must be available to someone who cannot hear. And again, it's not just blind, deaf, it's people with mobility challenges. It is the people who may have cognitive difficulties or not be able to comprehend sometimes all ends of the spectrum with respect to mental disabilities, intellectual disabilities. Making things clear, simple, and easy to understand and navigate are imperative to us traveling independently and safely, of course. I know that Representative Matt Blumenthal has helped us in Stanford with respect to, a decade ago, there was a renovation of the Springdale train station. And you might notice on the platform of train stations, those yellow raised dots. That's called a tactile mat. Well, after the renovation here in town, nobody put that there. So if I use my cane to find the end of the track, by the time I find that dip, I could be off the platform and onto the tracks. Other examples, as Jim alluded to, is just being able to travel safely and independently. It comes to mind very prominently is I use a service dog, as does my wife. And we brought this up to the commissioner at one time, to the DOT during our quarterly meetings. But it's imperative to impress upon all of you on the committee who may have some more authority to realize that we get denied with our service dogs by Uber and Lyft dozens of times a year. It's against Uber and Lyft policy. It's against the federal law of the ADA for discriminating against a person with disability. And it's also against state law for denying access to a public accommodation to a person using a service dog. We've been driven by, people try to slowly drive by and make believe we don't know till our ping says another driver's being, allocated to us. They'll stop by and argue with us that they don't take dogs and don't take pets, and these are not pets under the law. Or they'll just cancel the call if I happen to say, hey, please be advised, I have a service dog, and they'll just cancel the right there. It is a class C, I believe, misdemeanor in Connecticut to discriminate this way against a person with a disability, but there's no accountability. Uber and Lyft don't care. The state has laws on the book regarding this. The local police authorities have no clue this exists. It's fruitless for me to try to convince them that they should be writing a ticket. So getting some help on that front would be great. Because again, it is discrimination and we face it every day, whether using the pedestrian right of way, i.e. sidewalks, which are inaccessible or blocked or crumbled. So transportation, your committee has something to help with that perhaps, to release some funding to make sure that the sidewalks are ADA compliant with respect to the space available and the signals that are audible. You may notice around some of the larger towns, some of the accessible pedestrian signals, you hear a beeping sound. That's to let me know where it is to guide me towards it. And some of them, you press a button, hold it, it will tell you where you are and let you know you're crossing Broad Street at Washington Boulevard. Others do not, and that's out of compliance. There also should be a beacon on the other side chirping to let me know where to walk, because many crosswalks are askew and not a straight walk across the street. So those are the things about accessibility I hope you'll take into consideration, or maybe have any questions or follow up with us. The second part would be, as Kate mentioned, we are woefully out of compliance. Probably I'm rolling around my room. I'm sorry, I don't know where I ended up. Woefully out of compliance with respect to several aspects of being a state advisory council appointed by government officials. I serve as chair of the State Rehabilitation Council for Services for the Blind, and we have extraordinary help from the Department of Aging and Disability Services and then the Bureau of Education Service for the Blind. We have a page on the state website, and we have staff from ADS or BESP putting out our meeting notices, putting out our calendar, putting out the meeting minutes. And as Kate referred to, if we are not on the state website, the public cannot find us. We cannot be of any assistance to the public or your committee, for instance, if you can't find us. And as also Kate mentioned, the website being privately run right now by the council is not accessible to me using a screen reader. I just hear link, 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 button, button, button. So we're out of compliance with that. And then the last thing about the website is that the state uh, Freedom of Information Policy statement on the state website, mandates how meeting minutes are posted, how notices are posted, where they're supposed to be posted, when the minutes are supposed to be let out on the agendas, so forth. We're not having that support to be able to do that, to make sure, again, everyone can find us, that we're compliant with the state law, with the ADA, and with the Freedom of Information Act policy of the state of Connecticut. So I know I'm spitting a lot of stuff out right now, and hopefully some of it will stick against the wall, and you may have some questions or maybe conversations further down the line. But I thank you for letting me go on so much. As you can tell, this is all I do. I'm a disability rights advocate. I chair the Stanford ADA Council. I also serve on the Vision Zero Task Force for Stanford, on the Connecticut DOT Pell PAC for I-95 redevelopment through Stanford. And this is all we do. So thank you for allowing me to express my passion and concerns with respect to transportation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting, some of the concerns from the disability community, because we don't always hear those voices, particularly on the transportation committee. And it's so vitally important that we understand what the needs are and where we're falling short as a
Mhm.
state. It sounds like there's a lot of improvements that could be made. I know we've got some bills coming up that could be absolutely appropriate for
Mhm.
inclusion of some of these issues. And we'll be discussing, rail coming up at public hearing, bus transportation. And so asking some of these questions of both our DOT commissioner as well as others, just to understand where we're at in terms of compliance and what we could do better. So it's really helpful. We also have a bill coming up likely on transportation network companies. And so it's really important for us to hear that potentially some folks aren't playing by the rules. And we
Mm.
need to make sure that we're enforcing that and ensuring that folks in the disability community who do use service animals are allowed the rides that they deserve. So, and that they're entitled to. So thank you again for that. Does anybody else from the council want to speak before we dive into questions?
Can I
No?
just make one comment?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the most important thing. That Representative Blumenthal introduced that proposed legislation for the accessible seating to remain accessible to those who need it. Having a guide dog, for instance, when you get on a city bus or municipal bus, when you first get on, there are the two benches to the left and to the right, and then the rows. I have a 75-pound German Shepherd. My wife has a 60-pound German Shepherd. We can't fit into the normal rows of seats. So needing that bench seat where we could slide, our dog will sit, we'll slide them under the bench. Nobody knows they're there. So that's why it's important. Likewise, on the train, the accessible seating has wider spaces between the rows and allows us to fit into those seating areas without disturbing other passengers or becoming a trip hazard. Now, on the front of being or enhancing, being able to I can't think of the word right now, concussion kicking in, but enforcing these standards or rules, which MTA does have about making sure these seats are staying open, they're pretty reluctant to enforce it, saying they really can't. However, I've seen conductors on trains get pretty abrasive with customers who don't have the fares on the trains. So asking people if they really need that seat, of course, there are hidden disabilities, but if it appears that it's a group of kids getting in a train somewhere and they grab the first seats available, which may be the accessible seats, that hinders us from actually using the train, and we stand up between the trains as we know where to place our dogs. On the buses, same thing. We can't force a bus driver to stop, pull over, call the police, and wait for someone to come to enforce the law. But having a way to, make it more recognizable that these seats are reserved for a purpose. And I think Matt had a great idea, Representative Blumenthal, to a public awareness campaign will be best of all, I think, to help maybe hinder or hinder the continued use of these seating. So I just want to add that. And again, thank you for letting me mention that as well.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. And, we're sitting up here nodding our heads because as a screening committee, the leadership of this committee screens all of the legislation. And we
Mhm.
did talk about Senator Blumenthal's proposal at length. And like I said, there'll be public hearings coming up on some bills. So we'll have to discuss it further, having DOT run, they're within their authority to run a public awareness
Mhm.
campaign. Right before this hearing with this informational hearing, we had an oversight hearing with Commissioner Eucalito in the Department of Transportation, and he did touch on enforcement of accessible seating on public transportation. I know it's something we have to dive into further, and certainly evidenced by your commentary today. So again, appreciate you highlighting that. It gives us some information, some questions to ask at our public hearing, and we'll have to make a determination about how we move forward with respect to awareness, enforcement, ensuring that we have further accessibility as we look to enhancements of both our bus and rail lines moving forward. So thank you again. I just want to thank everybody for being here, again, for all of your comments. As I said, we had the Department of Transportation right before you all came, and I'm not sure that you heard any of that, but the commissioner highlighted the rail numbers, the ridership numbers on all the lines, and it's an incredible success story. So really great to see. And certainly we want to see that on Shoreline East as well. And what we're seeing in terms of increase in ridership is terrific. But as I mentioned to the commissioner, I always get a little bit, my feathers get a little bit ruffled when I'm looking at the numbers and I see, these soaring numbers on all the other lines. And yes, Shoreline East ridership has gone up, but only since we've made these investments. And we're really not comparing apples to apples when all of the other lines have seen increased investment, have seen, a return at least to pre-pandemic levels. And we just didn't see that, as you mentioned, Jim, with the Shoreline East line. So I really, as as everybody on this committee knows, I have been advocating for that. Many of our committee members have been advocating. We do have a piece of legislation before the committee that we will be hearing next week, in fact. So look for that on the agenda. We're hopeful that we can see further enhancements to at least get us back to those pre-pandemic levels. Because as we've seen, even in putting that small $5 million investment into the line, we've seen increased ridership. People are beginning to trust the line and its efficiency again, and its connectivity. And I just want to touch on, because, we all know this, Kate, you sort of mentioned about transportation. We all have this passion for transportation and, the benefits, the economic benefits, the environmental benefits, the public health benefits, both from, a physical health standpoint, but mental health, certainly, and increasing connectivity for people, making sure that they're connected to workplaces, but also recreation and other people. We're talking about this loneliness pandemic. Well, this is how do we solve for that? And public transportation is a big component of that. And so grateful for you all to be able to liaise with the riders of both now buses and trains. And I just wonder how you touched on it a tiny bit, the addition of busing under the council's purview. I wonder, who you're hearing from. Are you getting equal participation from both bus riders as well as rail riders? And what sorts of things are you hearing from commuters?
Yeah, I'm going to touch on that a little bit, then I'll certainly pass it over. I just want to clarify one point they made, and actually amplify. You are so right about the investment. The Waterbury branch line, not only did it get $110 million. By the way, I'm a user, so I remember your advice last year, Chair Gavrala. I do sincerely. Not only but I'm a user and I live in Derby. So we got the $110 million passing sidings, and then we got the 7 additional trains, right? So that's why the Waterbury branch line was the first line that exceeded its pre-COVID member ridership. Now, along with Hartford, they're the only 2. But to your point, the state made the investment and the ridership came. So yeah, I just wanted to amplify that point. I'll just say from a transit perspective, it certainly is my opening. Today, we're going to go to Union Station, and Doug Holcomb from the Greater Hartford Transit District will give us an overview on operations there, and he'll review some of the transit metrics. So for me, that's been the kind of eye-opening, is to see how hard it's been to get transit metrics as opposed to rail metrics. I know the CDOT's working really hard on a dashboard, but that's been a little bit of a challenge, I think, for us. So we have been meeting with transit operators, and I would just say one of my thoughts is just that the metrics has been a little hard to get. So
You had asked about how we are doing in terms of connecting with riders. I still think that we're probably skewed a little bit more towards rail users. They tend to be more active with our social media and are kind of, I think, quite savvy at figuring out how to get a hold of us. Being in touch with bus riders, we have looked at our schedule over the course of the year to see where we can host meetings. I think that there's a way to kind of figure that out that I don't know that we've hit on yet. And because our council members are all over the state, it creates challenges in terms of being able to kind of all of us gather in one spot. But we had a transit user come in and give us a whole presentation on, what he sees for southeastern Connecticut. And yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to Doug.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. So for the last year, we've been integrating as far as trying to bring more voices from different transit in the room. And I think some of the things we've heard a little bit, at least from my perspective, I'm on the board of the Greater New Haven Transit District. We provide paratransit within 3/4 of a mile of all CT Transit New Haven network line, which is how we're defined. We're, created via state statute, and it's a powerful statute. And one in other locations, you might know, other transit districts are smaller and larger, and some provide fixed route transit, some provide just paratransit. As we're mentioning, we're going to Greater Hartford Transit District, which owns historic Union Station here in Hartford, excuse me, force of habit. So some of the things we've heard about is the 2021 expansion of service in New Haven from our region in the New Haven County. 30% expansion of service in the fixed route buses. That has seen a tremendous improvement in ridership for the CT Transit New Haven services, which goes to show a lot of the benefit that comes from simplicity in a transit system. Interoperability, interconnectivity, intermodality is important. Simplicity is really important as well. So now in New Haven, all bus lines run from 4:30 to 1 a.m. If they're running that day. So not all are doing 7 days a week. Some are 5, some are 6, some are 7, depending on the need for the service. But that expansion was huge, and the commissioner and the DOT are lauded, as well as this committee, for helping pay for that expansion, of course. Other things we've heard are third bike rack that is coming from the DOT. That's actually a big excitement for some people who sometimes have to leave their bike when they didn't mean to, because there's only 2. And so I think there's a new standard coming out, which 3, which is there was a big effort to get the first 2 and to have the DOT just expand the service and just say, you know what, let's just add a 3rd one because we can. And in the next procurement, we're not going to waste anything, but in the next procurement, let's expand that. Is great. There's also a recent bus stop program. I think I can speak for the council here. We talk and hear about lack of sidewalks at bus stops and interconnectivity of even state routes. I think a lot about Route 1. I think about an employee or a customer of something like an REI, a place that really cares about the environment, where you can't get off in a wheelchair because there's no sidewalk at the bus stops. There's no connection between REI and the neighboring bowling alley or what have you. So you can't walk next door. You'd have to drive next door. And so really targeting from my view, something I always want to talk to people about is a fast bus network, rapid bus network, just like you have here in Hartford, the fast track system, but Route 1, the entire state, if you must, I would love the entire state to be connected by a rapid bus network. I think there is a study that showed the Milford to New Haven area or the New York to New Haven County area would be a tremendous return on investment if you had a BRT system on Route 1. Possibly that had some interconnectivity to our train stations to provide that reliability and redundancy to get people around. I think you're also hearing a lot about Groton and about the need, and on behalf of our late friend, Groton is going to be growing big. and you're hearing every committee in the state of Connecticut legislature, I felt like every committee I've heard talking about electric boat hiring and the biggest challenge of transportation and housing. So having that redundancy to the east is really important, and it's really exciting to hear. The other thing we used to hear more about is the expansion to the east of service for Shoreline East, but also Eastern Connecticut study that Zell used to be heading up for our council. Amtrak also has one going in addition to the state of Connecticut's. So, it's something that we need to think about is how do we get to 6,000 hires at Electric Boat? How do we get them housing and how do we get them around? It's going to be fast buses going up the Connecticut River, and it's going to be hopefully redundant train systems going along the shoreline. So we've heard a lot about interoperability, and then I'll pass that off to my colleagues for anything else regarding our system. But I'll say the electrification of the bus system has been great. Transit Equity Day in New Haven, Kate and I got to go on an electric bus ride around the green, and it was wonderful. They're quiet and they don't cause any smog, and that's great. So those are the things I've been hearing in the transit district world.
I got to go on a bus ride in New Haven, also on an electric bus, which was fantastic. Curious, because I was asking a little bit about your connection to community, to riders. Is there currently any communication about the Connecticut Public Transportation Council on buses, at train stations, any of that? How do people know how to get in touch with you?
Great, great. That's a great area for an opportunity.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Good to hear it. And I know I had one other question, but I am going to turn it over to, you have any questions? To my co-chair.
Good. Are we at afternoon? We're almost at evening. Hello, everybody. And I apologize for my late arrival. I was very excited to see all of you again. And what a memory. I just have two quick questions, if I could. Kate, coming back to you talking about the Orca card you mentioned. When we were talking about providing transit for youth, one of the things last year when we talked about it, when we got the pilot rolling, we talked about how important it was to get them to work and after school activities. And then you heard those kids speak. We heard how important it was to get them to one another, to social opportunities, to third spaces, that kind of thing. So I don't know that anyone can argue against the importance. And where we get stuck is when we talk about the cost, because it's not something that we can put a direct cost upon. So I would love if you could share any information that you may have about how Washington, for example, if you know, was able to put a number on it, or be able to remove that from the conversation, because we know that what we're doing is we're putting people on buses and routes that already exist. So what is that actual cost? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the state of Washington funds this through a cap and invest program, and it was part of a larger climate bill, kind of similar to SB4 in 2022, where they looked at kind of what they were doing with their investments. And then I believe they invested $2 billion into their transit systems. Cap and invest could be a third rail, and it's climate and transportation. I think you have to think of those two things together, but that is how they fund it. They also have reduced rates for senior citizens and for people who are low income and have disabilities, but they also make the threshold, like, it's easier, like, to be able to get a reduced transit pass here in Connecticut until we get the universal fare tap and go system is really burdensome. It involves mailing things. You have to have all this extra paperwork. And you have to think about, like, someone who's already struggling, like that's not going to work. And the likeliness that you'll actually get to the end point where you have the reduced fare. I think that a universal fare, like single card tap system, is great. That's an admirable goal to have. But I just keep hearing in the back of my head that comment, and I'm pretty sure I can attribute to Commissioner Eucalito that, if we don't charge anybody, we have people who could pay. And so we're charging everybody. then let's make it more equitable for the people who need it and for the kids. But the Orca card system is great. I'm happy to, send over more research to your committee so that way you can all see how they've structured it. And the cards are super cute too.
That would be terrific. Thank you. And I actually hadn't even thought about how tap and go, which the commissioner was just speaking about in our meeting a few days, hours ago. The the tap and go to eat would be able to ease that burden is wonderful to hear. Is Mr. McGowan still on the call?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for talking about ADA compliance and
Mhm.
what that looks like here and what it should look like. I was actually wondering if you had any information to share about any other states that maybe are doing specifically the Braille and raised print and need for audible components when you're in person, all of that.
Mhm.
Can you name anyone who is doing that well?
I know San Diego is doing quite a bit. Houston, Texas is doing quite a bit. They have a really robust disability community there. But I really can't give you a laundry list of communities who do it well. Boston does it really well. But just because a community isn't doing it or state isn't doing it, doesn't make it okay. It's mandated under the Americans with Disability Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 if federal funds are used. So unfortunately, the ADA being 34 years old and the Rehab Act being 50 years old and the Architectural Barrier Act being from 1968, we have a lot of catch up to do. So anything we can do to provide information or give some opinions or perspective or examples of things, I could do that. But having a list right now of the best communities, I really am focusing on Stanford and Connecticut right now. And I know we're so inadequate and discriminatory, frankly, that we need to make things better. I hope that helped a little bit.
It absolutely does help. And, just having places that we can look as a committee
Yeah, yeah.
and as we're forming, whatever new and exciting ideas we can land on around this, to be able to look directly at places that are doing it well, even if they're
Mhm.
not doing it perfectly, is always super helpful. So I appreciate that tremendously, and I appreciate your advocacy on this. It's
Sure.
something that
I do have a recommendation though for getting information, and I'll give a shameless plug at DOT. Katie Hedberg is the ADA coordinator for highways. She is probably the most impactful state employee I've ever come across as far as knowing what to do, where to go, how to get things done. So I'd recommend that you reach out to Katie Hedberg at DOT. She's a fabulous asset and very resourceful.
fantastic. That's important to know. I will
Mm-hmm.
absolutely be doing that.
Okay.
And I just think we have to always remember, we have to remind ourselves that when we're talking about ADA compliance, the obvious things for us are sidewalks and stairs and access that way. We talk about the physical access and those physical barriers, and we don't often think about the kinds of things that you talked about today. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're welcome, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did remember my question, which was DOT communication. How has it been? I know that was the subject of public hearing last session, and just wondered if you had an update.
Yeah, so when the bill was changed, when the council was changed, it went from, we were meeting with CDOT on a monthly basis, and then and it made it, it's transitioned to a quarterly basis. So, I've been giving a lot of thought about that. So just to succinctly answer your question, I'll say that the team of Benjamin and Courtney and Elise are very responsive. They meet with us quarterly. They put a great deal of effort into the meetings, for certain. So, that part is phenomenal. I can't thank them enough for the effort that goes into it. So it's still quarterly. So I think we're still struggling with how do we get answers in between meetings, but the quarterly meetings are certainly powerful. I think it would be helpful if we heard a little bit more about events or press releases or things like that, or press conferences. A little more, that would probably be the only small area, is because we want to support. They talked about going to Transit Equity Day, right? I mean, we want to be there. We want to be a support. And
Mhm.
and the commuters, and no disrespect to you office holders, the commuters are an equal important part of the process. The people actually use, right? And so when they do these press events, they, I get it, right? Please, no disrespect. The politicians want to be there, right? They want to get their sound bites in. But the most important part of the equation, we find out about it usually through the press. So that would be the one area I would say they should get better at.
That's good to hear. So it sounds like there's more robust communication on the quarterly
Yes,
basis, but
definitely.
maybe just pinpointing when you have something that needs to be communicated or some quick answers. But also that makes sense to me that you would, be in the loop just to have more cheerleaders at these events because they are usually exciting events about some enhancement or expansion. So great to hear. I know Senator Wong has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to everyone. Thank you all for serving. The pay is fabulous, I've been told, and I think it's a wonderful compilation of membership because it reflects all regions of this state, all impact, and I really appreciated the new addition of Stanford Mayor Caroline Simmons to be able to offer some of the municipal impact as well. I think for me, I know the history dating back to 2016. Jim, you've been there, and Kate, you as well, right? When there was a possible just kind of expiration of the goal of the commuter council. And now we've had some recent legislation in 23 as part of this legislative group. The question is, why are you struggling so much with funding? What is your structure? Do you get any appropriations as a quasi agency with the goal of addressing and advocating for people who use public transportation?
Our
And
current-
you get appointments and have a important role. I'm going to be quick to read. I'm sure you guys all know it, but under Connecticut General Statute, Section 13B-212C, your powers and duties empowers you to study and investigate all aspect of the daily operation of commuter rail systems and public transit systems funded by the state. You are empowered to monitor their performance and recommend changes to improve the efficiency, equity, and quality of services of such commuter rail systems and public transit services. The council may request and shall receive, the keyword, if available, from any department, division, board, bureau, commission, agency of public authority of the state, or any political subdivision thereof, such assistance and data that will enable it to properly carry out its activities for the purpose set forth in this section. The council shall also serve as an advocate for customers of all commuter railroad systems and public transit services funded by the state. The Department of Transportation shall submit monthly reports with information and data concerning the on-time performance and passenger ridership of commuter railroad systems and public transit services funded by the state. And two, make quarterly presentations at the meeting of the council concerning reports and respond to reasonable inquiries made in advance of any meeting by the council. The council should, et cetera, et cetera. But you have been empowered statutorily by this legislative body, passed in 2023, these powers to be advocates for residents of Connecticut who utilize public transportation. Do you receive any funds? And have you been made aware beyond the quarterly meeting, these kind of exchanges? I know there's been improvement, but it was a low bar to set. But talk to me about where your funding is so that you don't reach into your own pocket to develop a website.
I mean, so there currently is no funding source. I will tell you that we've gone back and forth. We talk about the state being a resource, but there's times when we disagree with the Department of Transportation, and there are times that we're critical. The fare increase they're talking about maybe one area. So we want to retain our independence, but still have some type of financial help. Yes, I do. We came before this body last year and said there should be some level of funding. I don't know who that goes through. I don't know if it goes through CDOT. I don't, certainly, open for that discussion. But again, I shouldn't have to pay for the website. Kate, again, Representative Berger Gavallo missed my joke about Kate being richer than me. So, so Kate shouldn't have to pay for it now. I shouldn't have to pay for letters that we send out. I know it seems minimal, but it adds up, right? And so, you know, the MailChimp account that I maintain, that, you know, once you send out a certain amount, you have to pay for that, has a monthly fee. You know, so these things all add up, and there is no funding source. And it would be nice to find a way to do that where we still maintain our independence from CDOT, so we don't feel some level of being beholden to them if we don't agree with them all the time.
Let me be clear. You do not receive any funding appropriations from the Connecticut state budget
No,
to
sir.
do the tasks that we have statutorily empowered you to do.
No, sir.
Well, I think that's an important part of that conversation. Kate, I don't, you know, I'm sure you happily fund it all, but I think doing your job and doing what you need to do, this is a labor of love, all of you. You deserve tremendous credit. All of you deserve tremendous credit. We talked a lot about some of the proposals and bills. I would encourage all of you to consider the bills within transportation as it affects public transportation, and submit your testimonies and have your voices be heard. Because I think one of the challenges is, in order to fulfill your role in communications, you need to have some allocations and budgeting to be able to do your job. And I think that's one of the critical elements, because if you saw, and as I do, and to look at the composition of this group, it's truly a fabulous group of people that cares about public transportation. And we talk about a lot in this building in regards to social equity, economic parity and equity. I can't think of a better example of access and transportation for individuals that across all spectrums. I think the second part I want to add is we are fully aware as a state and as a country and as a world in regards to climate change and reducing traffic density on our roads. There can't be a better way than to get people out of their cars, off our roads, than to utilize mass transit. But that, in order for that to facilitate, you need to have availability, you need to have reliability, and you need to have safety and service be paramount. I think for this country being preeminent in so many things that we do, for anyone who's traveled to Europe and to have seen the transit efficiency and the utilization and the investment and the commitment that's necessary, I think we pale. And if we're truly looking at, and I know the leadership of this committee ties into transportation, but we're all very conscious about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. There can't be a better way to reduce that than to utilize and have a mass transit system that is trusted, efficient, and utilized. And I know that's a common vision that we have. So I appreciate this. Any issues that you have, you should let this committee know. We value your voice. I know I do. And thank you for the indulgence, Madam Chair. I don't have a lot of questions, and I hope that they'll share us viewpoints, but I'm glad to get your feedback. But I also want to acknowledge Michael Hurley, who is a dear friend, but also somebody who has stepped up to be a member of the committee via my appointment. But this is a man that commutes to New York and takes another line to go to St. John's University as a professor. But he brings a different perspective, and I value his perspective. But it reaffirms my comment that this group of council members are just elite and truly passionate advocates of public transportation. So I'm glad to hear your input on that. I said a lot, but to me, it's something that is very near and dear to me, as I've gotten heavily involved in the past years since 2016 on this issue.
I'd like to think I'm a dear friend too. Here, I just want to point out, when it comes to funding, the only thing I don't think we're looking to break the bank, so I would tell you it would be helpful if we had the website hosting. Oh my God, we went to Shoreline East last year and we were hosting a meeting on the Shoreline East and we had to actually use a table for a screen. We had to flip a table over for a screen. Kate brought her laptop, right? Or one of us brought our laptop, right? And we actually had to flip a table over. So it'd be nice to be able to do hybrid meetings in the right way. And we could put together just a small, reasonable list of needs. Truthfully, that would allow us to be a little bit more professional and maybe do a little more things like advertising where we are. Everything we do is through our own pockets and our own resources. So I just wanted to point out that it's not a lot that we're looking for.
Jim, you are a dear friend for all your years in Bigelow and your leadership and guidance, and also your multiple role beyond being a commission member, Board of Education in Derby and many other roles. No doubt. But what is an acceptable amount? Would $50,000 on an annual basis be over the moon for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that we're looking for would be one-time costs. Like it would be great to have an owl, the video conferencing tool where you can see 360 degrees everyone in the room for when we go to on-site meetings where not everyone can participate. A screen would be great. Again, we did use folding tables kind of held up. And then I really loved your idea about, being able to actually engage with riders when they're using the transit systems. And so I think a small amount of money each year where we can have, some part of the bus, they're advertising on the ceilings now. So there's certainly room, would be great. So, that's a huge amount of money. We certainly don't need that much. Thank you.
Just through our LCOs, there is no prohibition for your council to make a request for a grant application, is there?
We wouldn't have a accounts receivable, payable, or anything, but I think to your point, Senator Wong, and thank you. I forgot to say, my name's Douglas Housley, and I'm New Haven resident. And to your point, we could also use some amount of training for the team. There are plenty of regional opportunities to learn more about the expanded role that the CPTC is expected to perform on behalf of the legislature in the state of Connecticut. And but at the moment, we couldn't. We would have to have a fiduciary to apply.
No better time than now. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the, and I'll close by just offering my condolences to the Stevers family. Zell was a impressive advocate from his days in Darien, then moving out to the other side of the state, Noyak. He brought a perspective that it is not just only, one line and versus another. And maybe I'll pitch that I wholly support Shoreline East and the increased ridership and utilization, because I think it is the right thing to do for every other train line. But I also want to make a pitch for the New Haven line as well, the Metro North New Haven line, when you consider that nearly 70% of all taxes that are paid in the state of Connecticut come from southwestern Connecticut. And our rail lines are such an integral part going from New Haven into New York City that we need to make that continual investment and safeguard the efficiency, the availability, and the safety of the Metro North line of New Haven line as well, in addition to Shoreline and Waterbury and all the other lines that are essential. I think we need, as I said before, the state of Connecticut needs to make an investment that is above and beyond to produce the quality and the efficiency so that we can take cars and people off the roads. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Senator Wong. I do see Mr. McGalnick. Do you have a comment on some of the questions or commentary from Senator Wong?
I do, Madam Chair. Senator Wong, I want to thank you for your kind words as well as your appreciation of what the council was meant to do under the statute. I think that often we may think of ourselves as an advocacy group, but I try to press upon everyone I speak with that it's more than that. We should be a partner with DOT, trying to help them make sure that the riders of all public transportation methods and pedestrians are getting what they're entitled to, a safe and accessible transportation system. So by reading the statute, I really appreciated you doing that. And I just want to thank you for your kind words, your appreciation of what we're trying to do, but holding us accountable as state appointees as well.
Thank you for that. And I will just say, DOT actually approached us about the Public Transportation Council and having bus encompassed under the council's purview. And I think that's because they do recognize the value in the Public Transportation Council as a conduit to riders across the state of Connecticut. So we need to clearly improve not only some communications with riders, but maybe elevate the website and get you an OWL tool so you can properly run meetings. And what I think probably needs to happen is another bond authorization for DOT to be able to distribute those dollars to you. That's probably the proper way to do it. So we can discuss that in the committee on how to move something like that forward, but it probably needs to go through finance, revenue, and bonding, and be allocated to you all through DOT. But again, something we need to have a public hearing on and maybe discuss. But it sounds like your needs aren't that great, and we should certainly be able to meet them, especially if we're giving other appointed councils dollars to do the work that they do as well. So I know Representative Kennedy has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do have just two questions, kind of following when Senator Wong was reading the statute. Is the council full as far as appointments to the council? Is every seat full?
Well, I believe we have not replaced Zell yet, so I think we're
Okay.
down one. Other than that, yes, we're full.
Thank you. And I'm really sorry to hear about Zell, but I have a feeling he's watching over you guys right now. And then my second question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought when we had discussions last year that there were times when you have a trouble with a quorum to conduct your meetings, or am I that could have been another one?
No, I don't-
This
I
is a long day.
I don't think we've had.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks so much for all you do. I really appreciate it.
But last year we may not have been as full as we are now. We were probably waiting for some of the appointing authorities. When you transferred over, some of the appointing authorities were a little slower than others. So but
Okay.
it might have been a few years ago. Yes,
Great.
ma'am.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all you guys do. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. And yeah, I too would be remiss in not mentioning Zell. He was such an incredible advocate. And we had done so much work even last session. And I know his death came at the end of the session and was just a shock to the entire community. He was such a fierce advocate for public transportation, but also for Shoreline East. And so I really got to know him a bit through that advocacy and was grateful for all that he did and all the time that he committed to the state and to transportation efforts. So I'm sure he's left a gaping hole in the council. With that, I'm cognizant of the time. We're after 5 p.m. Grateful to you all for being here and just looking forward to continued communication with the committee so that we can continue to enhance public transportation for all the residents and folks even outside of the state. We want everybody using our public transportation system. So thanks so much for all you do and all your very, very heavy volunteer work. So thank you and have a good meeting tonight.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.